The Green Lantern movie kind of had the same problems as the Christopher Nolan movies in a different fashion. They weren't more realistic and gritty, but it kind of closed itself off. Sure, it had a final end tag credit, or it had a post-credit tag that implied a next film, but for one thing, the film's villain is a universe destroyer, and that's not really a good first movie choice. Parallax wasn't the best option for the villain, but Green Lantern has always been in a revolving role, and for a lot of people, due primarily to the Justice League cartoon, that was Jon Stewart, and they cut him out of the script of the Green Lantern film. And the film doesn't really leave room for him to show up, or any other Earthbound Green Lantern, because the film closes with this monologue.
Of all the lanterns who have ever worn the ring, there was one whose light shined brightest. At first, his humanity was thought to be a weakness, and yet it proved to be his greatest strength.
I mean, seriously, it ends with,
Jordan is the greatest.
That's not a good way to end that. Though it did work out for this hack. For a while, DC thought maybe what they should do is kind of reverse engineer the Marvel plan. Start with the Justice League movie and start spinning movies out of that. The Justice League movie was supposed to be directed by George Miller of Mad Max fame. And Mad Max Fury Road makes me go, what would that have been? They even had already cast Armie Hammer as Batman, which seems like a great choice. It's a real what could have been story, and it's disappointing that it fell apart. But since Nolan didn't want to build a universe again that didn't really leave room for aliens and Amazons, Nolan wanted the Batman Dark Knight trilogy to just stand on its own, which is fair and valid, and I think makes sense. So DC did manage to talk him into helping guide their new universe, starting with Man of Steel. As their main guide, they brought in Zack Snyder. Snyder is a visionary director. I'm not one of those people that really hates him. I think he's got a great eye. I liked Watchmen. I thought Watchmen had some great... I mean, really, Watchmen and 300 show a guy who can really bring a page to life. I mean, they look like their source material, which is kind of neat. I mean, comic book movies should give you some license to be really creative. And a lot of comic book movies didn't ever really do that. They just kind of went for how lifelike can we make it. And then I just think that he shows creativity. I really liked his Dawn of the Dead remake. I feel like I need to revisit Sucker Punch. I wasn't really a big fan of the connective tissue, but I did think the fantasy story parts looked just amazing. Of course, neither 300 nor Watchmen are perfect films, but they definitely showed a unique visual style. And that goes to Snyder. That's a talent of his, regardless of how you feel about his movies, as far as the substance of them. And so Man of Steel got released in 2013, and it didn't do a lot of world planting. They just focused heavily on Superman, which I think is the wise move in and of itself. Don't make it about how Superman fits into a larger universe. Make it about how Superman is Superman. But make it more, just focus on Superman. Plant your seeds, and the movie did do that. You saw stuff with Wayne Enterprises on it. I believe there was some news footage in the background showing Gotham, and that works. That's really how you should do that kind of stuff. And yet, still, I find Man of Steel a bit of a disappointment. For one thing, a perfect encapsulation of the problem I have with it is this.
I know you did, but we talked about this. Right? Right? We talked about this. Oh, Clark, you have to keep this side of yourself a secret.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
It's one of my criticisms of how Smallville handled things. The Jonathan Kent is so dedicated to the secret, he's willing to suggest that Clark maybe not be heroic. Which just feels like it's not the Kents. And then to make matters worse, the attempt to make Jonathan Kent's death super dramatic gives us this. I mean, he motions for Clark to just let him die. You might ask, what's the big deal? What's the problem? But if you go back to Richard Donner's 1979 Superman the movie, Glenn Ford's Jonathan Kent.
Yeah, I know I shouldn't.
Yeah, I know. You can do all these amazing things, and sometimes you think that you will just go bust unless you can tell people about it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, every time I get the football, I can make a touchdown.
That's for sure.
Every time.
Yeah.
I mean, is it showing off and somebody's doing the things he's capable of doing? Is
No.
a bird showing off when it flies?
No. No, now you listen to me. When you first came to us, we thought that people would come and take you away because when they found out, the things you could do, and that worried us a lot. Then a man gets older and he thinks very differently and things get very clear. And there's one thing I do know, son, and that is you are here for a reason. I don't know whose reason, whatever the reason is, maybe it's because, I don't know, but I do know one thing. It's not to score touchdowns. Huh? Yeah.
Thanks, Dad. I'll race you to it. Yeah.
You will.
Come on. Come on, Pop. Right.
Oh, no.
He dies of a heart attack. And yeah, that's less dramatic than a tornado. But the point is Superman can't prevent his father from having a heart attack. It's teaching Superman that there are things outside of him that he cannot control, even with all his power. There are things outside of his ability to contain. Yeah, the film kind of undermines that at the end. But, okay. It's still more powerful than having him die in a tornado. And frankly, Clark could have easily rushed in. They could have both been sucked into the tornado. Clark could have flown him out where nobody could see. Drop themselves somewhere and go, whoa, it was the freakiest thing. It carried us for a mile and then spit us out. Weirder things have happened in real life, people. I also am just not crazy about the use of Zod. It was obviously an appeal to the nostalgia over Superman 2. Superman 2 isn't as strong of a film as we remember. I recall going back and suddenly finding myself going, hey, okay. Among other things, Superman 2 has that really badly chosen scene where Superman, and he got beat up earlier in the film after he depowered himself. He gets beat up by that trucker. Well, then he comes back at the end of the movie and he beats the trucker up. And that is not a noble act. That just is so outside. The idea that Superman would be that petty is just frustrating. And Man of Steel actually kind of pays an homage to that with a sequence where Clark, gets back at a trucker. I get that that's supposed to be, well, he's human, but it's too human for what Superman represents. But getting back to the point of Zod and his super team represent a huge threat. And this is almost like Green Lantern, where it's this massive threat. Now it's an Earth level threat. It's not like the whole universe is about to be destroyed, but they're going to lay waste to the Earth. It ends up being all this crazy stuff, and it's of course super destructive and big deal, and a big deal fight where half of Metropolis is just leveled. And a lot of people have argued that this was because people complained about the lack of action in Superman Returns. The problems of Superman Returns was not lack of action. In fact, its action set pieces were largely very good and exciting. And I liked those parts of the movie. I think having Lex Luthor as a supporting character would have been a good idea. Just introduce him. Don't make him the big mastermind or anything. He's not. Don't have him in league with Zod. Just have him be this rich scientist / or even if they wanted to go the tech giant route, have him be a guy who looks at Superman and says he didn't earn his power. He just has it. So I can't trust him. He can't be trusted. Have him expressing Batman's attitude from Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Have him be that initial voice. He doesn't trust Superman at all. And this brings us to the part where my problems, aside from a brighter color scheme, my problems could have been mostly solved